Alicia Gray, the Economic Development and Housing Manager for the City of Minnetonka.
Julie Wishnak, Community Development Director.
Corinne Heine, City Attorney.
Mike Funk, City Manager.
Paula O'Malley, City Council Member, Ward 3.
Rebecca Shack, Council Member, Ward 2.
Brad Wiersum, Mayor.
Kizzy Coakley, Ward 4.
Patsy Foster Bolton, Ward 1.
Kimberly Wilburn, City Council at Large.
Marina Domin, Assistant City Manager.
Sarissa Falk, Senior Management Coordinator.
Leslie Barlett, ACE Intern.
And, yes, go ahead.
What is your name and your residence?
Sally Bressler, live on Crown Hill Road, and I'm representing the Minnetonka Community Housing Team.
I'm David Allen. I live in Hidden Valley Road, and I'm with Sally.
Very good. And then Deb.
Deb Albert, City Council at Large, Seat A.
Very good. Thank you. So we've got, Mike and I talked today about our meeting tonight, and we have an aspiration of trying to get this all done in a couple of hours. Ideally, we'd be done at 8:30, so I've kind of got some time stamps on that, and I'll encourage people. But with that, we have business items, and it's a strategic plan update. And Mike, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, Brad. I'm just going to quickly hand it over to Sarissa, who will introduce tonight's topic, and her and Julie Wishnak will present, and I may chime in.
Okay, sounds good. As we've done before, we're continuing the conversation on the strategic plan refresh. So continuing the conversation that we've done with Craig Rapp in April. We have talked through 2 strategic priorities so far, and today we're talking about livable, well-planned development. And as Mike said, Julie Wishnak will go through the outcomes, performance metrics, and targets. And as we're going through this conversation, just keep in mind that we want to have our focus narrowed as we are doing this refresh. And this should really be a 3-year plan, so things we can accomplish in 3 years. Mike, do you have anything to add?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Sarissa. Nice introduction. I would just add a couple things. And so as we're going through tonight and the next few meetings, what we'll be doing at the end of the year is, in culmination of all this, bringing back to you the kind of the full plan as, again, we vet through and hone in on the specifics. I just really appreciate everyone's conversation on this. Again, tonight we'll turn over to Julie to go through them. I would just make note that with our 6 strategic priorities, each one of those has 3 specific outcomes. And so that's 18 items. And so, again, you'll hear me say this and it'll be a little bit repetitive, but we'll have 18 really desired outcomes at the end of this. And that's really, I think as Sarissa mentioned, our real focus the next 3 years is what 18 outcomes are we really trying to be strategic about. So with tonight, we'll talk about 3 as it relates to livable and well-planned development. I know it's hard to really hone in on 3 when you think about all the housing needs and all of the economic development opportunities. So we do have separate economic development plans. We have separate, remember we have separate work plans for each department. We have other goals and priorities that we achieve. But this is being really strategic in nature. So just really kind of thinking about what are the 3 highest, most important directional items that we want to go with this category. So with that, let's just dive in and turn it over to Julie.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and Council members.
Thank you, Julie.
We have, just go to the next slide, please, I think.
Yeah,
there should be a slide. Sure. I have a slide.
Abracadabra.
Wait,
There we are. Oops.
wrong. Yeah,
you
there
go.
we go. One more. Wow. Bravo. Thank you. Alicia's helping.
It doesn't work when we did.
Oh, it's not on. Hello.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. All right, so the original language in the livable, well-planned community was a city with something for everyone. We actually deleted that language and offered balance, community-wide interests, and respect Minnetonka's unique features while continuing community investment. That's the strategic priority. And then the desired outcomes, I'll just go maybe line by line, if that's okay, Mayor, and then
That sounds good.
maybe you'll give me feedback as we go rather than do them all. So the first one and Deb and I were matched up for this at the strategic planning workshop. So we were having these conversations. The first one was enhancing vitality across the business sector, focusing on large corporate businesses. So Deb, since our conversation, I thought about what exactly did we want? And I think a lot of us have mentioned this connection to large corporations. And so we added that language. That's up for grabs. It just seemed like something that we were really trying to connect with. The net increase in number of businesses would be the performance metrics and also the estimated market value increase in that category of businesses. So having some tangible ways to measure what we were doing. And then the target would be net new businesses over a 3-year period, starting in 25 till 2027, and then increasing the estimated market value about by $1 billion. That's quite a high bar, but that is a 3-year period, and so big goals, but I think that's really the intention of this, to stretch and try to do something quite intense, right? Zero loss of large corporate businesses in the region, and we use the word specifically in the region because we do have movement of businesses, and it actually, if it's a movement within the region, that still is okay. Maybe it's not Minnetonka only, and we've had recipients of businesses that way, and also we've had exports of businesses to other communities, but again, as a region, it's functioning, and so I think we added that language on the end. I'll stop with that line item if you have any thoughts or input.
All right. Council comments, thoughts? Rebecca?
You know, at first I was taken a little back by the large corporate businesses, but then, I reflected on it a lot and thinking about Opus and office space and the major impact of losing something, even just the UHD building being vacated is such a substantial financial impact that then trickles down significantly. So I really, I think this is good, and I think it helps us meet all of the other goals in the plan, or in the strategic plan, by recognizing that a lot of our vitality comes from these large businesses. So I 0 notes.
Okay.
Other comments? Kizzy?
Well, that kind of stood out to me, focusing on large corporate businesses. Just was curious about where does that leave smaller businesses? Why couldn't it be more inclusive for all businesses versus large businesses? It singles out large businesses.
Right. I think what Rebecca was saying specifically is what I had in mind when we thought about this specific issue. Again, trying to be very focused on what we were talking about here. It's not like we don't have programming for smaller businesses or have any kind of efforts for smaller businesses. That continues to be done. Doesn't mean we're not doing the business survey. We're going to be doing that. We're going to be hearing from people. All the outreach is the same. But what is different here is you have a strategic plan to pay attention to what's happening with your larger corporation, so you don't end up with some of this large office space being vacant and vacated by large offices, because that really can impact your general fund, which then funds all of your other efforts. So it's kind of it's not like you're choosing, I think what you're being strategic about, thinking about the larger corporations. Because I would say in the past, primarily kind of just like, yeah, they're fine, kind of ignored, just kind of let them do their business. So I think being more intentional about that might be something that's worthwhile. But not at the loss of other efforts that we're doing, if that
What's
helps.
considered a large business? How do you define large businesses? Does it have to be what they bring in for as income, the amount of employees? What's defining the large businesses?
I would say a large corporation would be anything above 500 employees. That would be a large corporation. We have a top 10 list that we watch. That's I would call a watch list.
Okay.
So there's about 10 that sit on that list.
Other comments, anyone? Otherwise, excuse me, Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of respond because I understand Kizzy's question and really, I work in downtown St. Paul that is in desperate need of revitalization, and you really see what happens when large companies leave, and we're watching the tax capacity of different sectors and our taxes start sucking up the burden of losing commercial value and so forth within city boundaries. And so to remain a strong, vital city, that's something that I specifically brought up in the group when we were doing our strategic planning workshop. And, thinking specifically of Opus and many, we have so many Fortune 500 companies in Minnetonka, and in the post-COVID atmosphere, people not going to work, we're really in danger of commercial real estate just evaporating, and I want to do what we can to keep people coming to Minnetonka to work and keeping those businesses here in Minnetonka, because it doesn't just benefit the bottom line, say for rich people, it actually takes tax burden off the average resident and keeps our city vital. So to me, it's just sort of it is trickle down in a certain way, but it's also just, sort of important for the financial infrastructure and the vitality of the city.
And anyone else? Not to dwell too much, but I think this is somewhat unique to see a focus on large corporate businesses. But I think given where we've been and the last 5 years, having focus on this, not at the expense of our entire business community, but to say, these large businesses in Minnetonka, and we are fortunate to have a number of, some of the largest companies in the country are headquartered in Minnetonka. And that's fortunate, but then when you think about all of the employees that live in the region, not just Minnetonka, but they live in Eden Prairie, they live in Edina, they live in Hopkins, they live throughout the area, but it's a key driver, and to lose that base would really be significant. And I think the example that Rebecca had of the UHG headquarters building being for sale, because they don't need as much space they used to. But if we lost United Health Group, if we lost Medica, if we lost Carlson Companies, it would have a huge impact on our community. And so I think it's kind of unique to specifically highlight large corporate businesses, because they really are vital to the quality of life in Minnetonka and the West Metro, and frankly the entire Metro. So I think I'm supportive of that. But with the understanding, as Kizzy pointed out, that doesn't mean we don't. This is a focus area and it's a distinctiveness, but that doesn't mean we don't care about our other businesses, because we do.
Okay.
So
thank you. That's helpful. I'll move on to the next one. Just slightly changing the statement here. It's rewritten to say increase the number of housing units, affordable housing units in the city. And there's a kind of a reason we took out variety and type and some of those other kind of descriptors. Again, when we hear and talk about affordable housing, it's about all types of affordability. You have a housing policy that talks about the kinds of diversity that you want. So there's a lot of ways that you get this accomplished. So we took out some of the words variety and type and just said all affordable. You know, make it simple, make it focused. It's all affordable that you care about, and the purpose is increasing. And then obviously you measure that by the number of affordable units. And we added the words, I should have deleted the preserved because preserved is below. So I'll just say added for that second box. Then 100% increase, 100 unit increase in affordability below 80% median income over that 25 to 27 year time period, so that 3-year time period. So we can go back and look at some of the goals that we have and how we met those goals, but this is kind of generalizing our efforts on affordable housing. So I'll leave it at that for discussion.
Good. Comments on affordable housing and these changes? Anyone?
Quick comment.
Yes, yep, Paula, excuse me.
I think this is great, that we're focusing and specifically have numbers and targets and things like that. My only concern is that I've heard from residents who are between 80 and maybe 115% AMI, kind of that middle housing range. And so just want to make sure or see if there's any way to keep an eye on those things. I know we have a couple of programs that go up to, one program that goes
15.
Yeah,
Mhm.
115. So just, I don't know if it has to be a specific goal or something here. I know we're trying to limit, but just would like to, kind of be mindful of that as well. But which is difficult for our young professionals.
Got it.
Excuse me, Brad, I'm
Yep.
just gonna.
Jump in.
Oops. Yeah,
Just-
so,
I didn't have it on.
Patsy is breaking up. It's very hard to hear, and if I
Paula.
can't hear them.
That was
There was
me.
Paula.
Sorry. Sorry about that.
If you could just move your microphone just to hear closer, I think that might help. And I was going to say, Deb, we have the dancing youngsters next door. That's not helping probably the noise level, but it's cute.
It's
very
cute, but they're very enthusiastic.
All right, other thoughts, comments? Kimberly?
So I was going to just mention sort of the other end of the scale, and again, I don't know that we need specific numbers on there, but as long that I want to make sure that we don't forget about deeply affordable housing as well.
30%. Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Thank you.
Both extremes.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Well,
Got it.
exactly. Well,
Got it.
any other comments? No, go ahead, Mike. Go ahead.
I just want to hear Councilmember comments. I do want to just be, again, kind of clear in this process. When you make comments, we're not changing what's up here unless you say we need to change this.
Mm-hmm.
So we're mindful of what you're saying and
Yes.
you keeping track of that. But what we're saying is increasing the number of affordable housing units is a significant intended outcome for the next few
Yep.
years, and those are our specific targets we're looking to meet. That doesn't take away from the things that are being said here, but just making sure that
Right.
if we want more metrics or different ways to measure things, then we want that information.
Good. So if anyone has anything specific they'd like to add, and then for clarity, Julie, you did say for the performance metric on this one, the number of affordable units added, period, the or preserved comes out. Is that correct?
Right, because we have preserved below.
Okay.
I think at first it was both together, and
Yeah.
then I'm like, nah, and I'll tell you why in a second. about
And that's
why.
good. I just
Yeah.
I want to be clear.
Yeah, we'll delete the second, or the last word in the second box.
Okay.
Just added, number of affordable units added, and then our target is 100% or 100 unit increase in affordable, 80% below. Now that doesn't sound like much, just FYI, but if you look at if we're doing mixed income or we're doing a unit at a time,
That's a lot.
That's a lot of units. So
Right.
just keep that in mind.
Understood. And, you know, to Kimberly's point, not unlike the last one, we're focusing here on 80% median income and below. That doesn't mean we start turning our back on, you know, the 80 to 120. I mean, we still have some specific programs. Homes Within Reach is one that I believe goes up to 120, and we have others.
A lot of the programming too.
Programming.
Yeah.
So it's like this is a focus area, but it's not at the expense of everything else.
Good point. Fair. So the last one is really about, totally changed this one, Deb, sorry. We had clarity on proper balance of development, and what was interesting about that, as we talked, Sarissa and I and Mike met, and it was about how do you measure that? It wasn't measurable, and we were struggling with how to gain clarity on how to deal with that as a desired outcome. I think people feel that way. I'm not saying that, I'm not discounting that as an issue. I think there's a lot of balancing that you all do as decision makers, and it's hard, and maybe you would like a path that leads you to an easy answer sometimes, but I'm just not sure that's measurable. So I think open to hearing your thoughts about that. So I added another one to really hone in on preserving our existing affordable units and support those households with additional programs. And so the measurement, the performance measurement of that is the number of units preserved, and also increase the number of households assisted. And I'll give you an example. So that would be like the townhome project near Cedar Lake Road, right? We had $1 million of infusion to rehab 30% units so that you could continue the affordability. And so that would be an example of units preserved. And that's how we would track that. And the goal for that 3-year period would be at least 50 units preserved from 25 to 2027, and increase the number of households assisted by 10%. So this is,
It says 150 units.
I'm sorry,
there.
150
Okay.
units preserved. I meant that.
Okay, good. I'm with you.
I meant that. It's higher than the number of new, because I think, you know, we're just coming off a new construction kind of massive overload, right? I mean, I just don't think it's going to continue to be that strong. So definitely preservation is a focus area that we've talked about a lot, but it's not something we've targeted. And I think that's probably needed in this kind of next iteration of the strategic plan. So again, Deb, I'm sorry we totally changed gears on this one, but open to hearing your thoughts.
And Deb, I don't know if you have any comments?
Well, you know, one of the things that I mean, Julie knows her business better than I do, so you know, I don't want to question it, but one of the things that has disappeared from this page is sort of making variety a goal, and also, you know, I think we were talking about sort of not having, you know, we build a lot of rental property, and not a lot of owned multifamily, and so there's no incentive in our strategic plan for any kind of variety and development. I think, you know, I trust our planning staff and our development staff to be open to creative projects and so on and so forth. But there is, you know, we did take out in the box above the variety, and we're kind of, you know, taking out any sense of balance between different kinds of development, you know, whether it's commercial or multifamily or single family. And I think, you know, there are other people, I don't want to put words in anybody else's mouth, that are looking for different kinds of housing types that we don't build very much, and, you know, I know some people are looking for density and so forth, and just making sure that we're not just building stuff, but there is a balance between all the competing interests in Minnetonka, also having to do with green space and so forth. So I just feel like that's sort of gone silent here. So I don't really know how to address that.
Other comments, council? Anyone? Kimberly?
I don't know how to address that either.
Well, I think your strategic priority definitely talks about that balancing act that you have to go through. Now, it's whether or not, I think what Deb was getting at is, does the desired outcome support your strategic priority enough, right? So do you feel okay with the language? Do you feel like we should add some language to help strengthen that balance question or not? And again, I can't measure balance.
Right.
Yeah,
Measure
yeah,
that.
Well, that's the
That's what I was
difficulty
gonna
thing. What I might consider balanced might be different than what Patsy considers balanced, and so that's
subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rebecca?
I think I totally hear, you know, what Deb's saying. Thinking back to kind of what Craig talked to us about and having something very quantifiable, that balance piece, I think, is harder to, you know, if we look at the original language, I think it's pretty difficult to really be able to check that box. You know, if we're really looking at how our report's going to come out when we're looking at how we're doing on this progress, I think it'd be tough. So, and I think that we really need to give this attention on preserving existing affordable housing. And I think that touches on that owner-occupied piece and gives us an opportunity there to do, you know, consider what we're doing and keep doing the good things that we're doing in regards to preservation of existing units. And I think there's maybe some opportunities there that we haven't thought of. So I feel pretty good about this. And I think some of that other stuff's going to come in the conversation later when we talk about what we're going to be doing with the zoning.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments, anyone? You know, I'm just going to throw a couple of quick comments. You know, I don't think we've used the term variety actually very often. We've used diverse housing types, is my recollection. And we use that terminology not because we wanted such diverse housing types. We felt that that was a tool to help move us toward getting more affordable housing and, you know, varying price points and things like that. So I'm comfortable with this because I think by putting the metrics against delivery of preservation of increasing affordable housing units, it says it more explicitly. And I think that we're still interested in diverse housing types, but that is really a tool to get to the end, and the end is laid out in the target here. We want more affordable units. We want to preserve more units and affordable units. I think this is more measurable, but I don't think it causes us to be any less committed to a diversity of housing types, which has long been part of our strategic plan and our objective. So I'm comfortable with it, even though it doesn't say it.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts, Alicia, Julie?
No, we're
Council?
just thinking about, I mean, I think some of the balance that Deb was talking about, I mean, obviously we don't just give you, when we give you information, we don't just say, oh, here's our affordable units, right? We say,
Right.
Here's how many at 30, here's how many at 50, here's 80, here's owner, here's rental. I mean, we give you the full kind of reflection of your work.
Right.
Here is just specifically how many units can you produce?
Yeah.
And can you get to 100 in that
Yep.
next time period? So I think that's you're trying to balance, and you do that every time you make a decision, but what is it that you're trying to get to, which is the
Right.
number of units. Okay.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So,
I think it's good.
Any, Deb, or anyone, any last comments? Because we are, I'm not
We're
doing a
at
very good
time.
job as
We're
a
at time.
timekeeper.
it's a half an hour.
I hear what everyone's saying, and I do agree that this is more measurable, and I just, it was just an observation that certain things go silent. And so then the onus is on staff and us to, pay attention to the things that are implied and not spelled out. So, I agree that this is more measurable.
Good
Yeah, I
point.
think we'll pay attention to that checks and balances on when we do these projects,
Good.
just highlighting that, Deb, to make sure we're honing in on that issue. Sorry,
Mike, you have a comment?
Yeah, just real quick, I think what we can also do is when we, as I said earlier, we'll bring this complete package back to you by the end of the year. We'll make a note that perhaps even in that definition where it says balance community-wide interests and respect, et cetera, perhaps we can weave in the word variety or housing types, because I think that is the goal, regardless, because we're saying we want to hone in on affordable housing units, but that also does mean variety, whether it's variety meaning the style of the development, what it might look like variety, and also variety in the sense of whether it hits a certain threshold of 30% AMI or 60% AMI or 80% AMI. So variety can mean, I think, a lot of different things too. But I think we all acknowledge that we do look for a variety and not just affordable housing at one particular price point. So we'll look at a way to maybe weave that in to the definition.
Understood.
Great.
The other,
Deb.
just to get back to sort of the other half of what the balance is, has to do with the unique sort of natural features, and not just, building on every square inch to achieve goals. I mean, it really is about balancing community-wide interests, and so that's also what I've been concerned about, but it's in the priority, it's there. So I just don't want to lose sight of it, because the measurability of the preservation of green space is not anywhere in the desired outcome or performance metrics. It's all about number of units. And so,
Fair.
Good point.
that gets
Thanks, Deb.
overlooked.
All right, any last comments? Otherwise, we will move on. So, and Alicia and Julie, did you get from us what we need?
Will this keep going, or do I have
Yeah.
an intro, Mike?
Well, I think,
Go ahead.
well, no, go ahead, Mike. If you want to intro the housing update, or if you want to just turn it over to Julie, up to you.
Yeah, let's turn over just 30 seconds real quick. So appreciate Julie and Alicia's work on this. Council, there's a lot of material in there that we'll cover. That's why we want to jump into it, because we're going to talk about a number of the housing programs. We'll talk about
To your mouth, I can't, it's very garbled.
Sorry, Deb, I accidentally had it off, so thank you. How's that? All right, thank you. Sorry about that, I'll just start over. So just a quick intro, we'll turn this over to Julie, because we've got about an hour or so worth of probably material and discussion. Hopefully all of you had a chance to really look at all the information that Julie and Alicia prepared for tonight's discussion. I think I mentioned to both our two newest council members that usually every July this is all things housing, so we do try to cover a lot of territory here this evening. And so a couple of things we'll touch on is certainly the zone co and the zoning update, and we'll have some decisions on direction on that. And then we'll talk about homelessness and perhaps where that stands and some of the work staff has been doing behind the scenes, and get your feedback on homelessness. An exciting, I call internal dashboard. So hopefully you had a chance to, in the supplemental staff report, click on really neat, yes, here's a professional term for the night, neat.
There you go.
Neat.
Neat,
I like neat.
very comprehensive approach to looking at all things housing. So a really good dashboard there pulled together. I think Julie and Alicia will cover that. A number of questions along the way. So with that, let's turn it over to Julie so we can dive in and have a really good conversation.
Okay, and we'll start with the hardest. Let's talk about zoning. And,
All right.
So back in April, you had the diagnostic report. If you recall, there was a lot of information kind of contained in this report. It had, if you recall, kind of the comparison of whether or not your goals were met in each section of the code, and they kind of highlighted things you should think about changing. I mean, that was the whole purpose, to try to get kind of a roadmap of things that they thought as a city where your zoning code may or may not be successful in meeting the goals that you've set out for yourselves. So, and that goes from everything from environmental to housing production to whatever. And so in that report, you know, we thought, okay, the next step is to try to actually get the code changed. And there's a couple of different approaches that we talked to the consultants about. And so we have option 1, 2, or 3. And really, option 1 is just rewriting the entire code. Full rewrite, not one stone unturned, and we're going to redo. As you remember, the presenter at the work session talked about how every so often this happens. The city goes through this kind of evolution. It's been since the mid-'80s since a full rewrite was done. And so in that, it definitely would talk about the goals. It would talk about what are barriers in our code. It would talk about the issues that users have now, which is sometimes it's, you know, pieces of it are here and some of it's over here. The graphics are outdated, you know, some of that stuff would get corrected in a full rewrite. But you'd also have fairly large engagement. So you'd have focus groups, you'd have public engagement, you'd have study sessions for the council and planning commission most likely to meet and talk about certain issues. Public meetings, public education, all of that's going on while you rewrite this over 1 year to a year and a half. That's about the estimate that our consultant has provided. And the second option, really it's just specific rewrites of sections, but a full reorg of the code. And so that is another option, just a little less effort in this particular option, but you're not doing a full rewrite. You're picking certain sections you want to focus in on, but the whole code would be reorganized. And you would say to me, isn't that less effort? Isn't it less expensive? Actually, it's not, because it's just as much work in terms of engagement and trying to get people to understand what you're changing and why you're changing it and get some feedback. So really, if you look at where the effort is, it's probably process that is so heavy in terms of the cost. The rewrite itself is being done by an attorney and then also other consultants who are specifically trained in zoning code creation. So you're paying a lot for expertise, but it also is a lot for process in both the first and second options. You have a option 3 is really just specifically writing a couple of sections, and really you would not have any reorganization happening in the code. And this is a little bit unknown because it really depends on how many you choose. If you just said, I want to rewrite the whole residential section, okay, well that's one option, and you can just rewrite that, and it's not as much public process, probably it doesn't take as long, that sort of thing. So those are your choices. Again, dealing with the budget in August, you would see, depending on how you kind of lean tonight about this issue, those costs would be spread over a 2-year period. So it would be between 75 and 100 for those 2 options per year for 25 and 26. Then remember, after that, then we're rewriting the comp plan. Same kind of numbers we're talking about for that process, 2-year process for the comp plan. So you roll right into the next kind of.
So they don't
project.
overlap. They roll from one to the next.
1
not-
year to the next.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, 27 is about when we would start writing the comp plan for the next iteration. So I will stop at this point because the question to you is kind of which option are you really focused in on? We don't have a specific preference. We know that in applying the code, it would be nice to rewrite it. We also know it's expensive, so we get it. We will deal with whatever you feel is necessary, but open to hearing feedback.
So, council, questions or comments or both? Rebecca.
My question is maybe just backing up a little bit. I mean, the idea is we have these recommendations from ZoneCo, And there's more conversation to have about that. And there are a number of things that this council may have an appetite and may come from the public process to say, we're not just doing this to get it better organized. We're doing it to determine what we need, what changes we need to make to advance it, get it better organized and more user friendly. That would kind of be the purpose. Am I analyzing
part
that
of it,
correctly?
yeah.
And so I think in kind of reviewing the comments that came in this afternoon, this idea that we're going to know today what changes are going to come out of this process, and we're going to tell you that tonight. That's not the purpose of this. It's really, we've got to engage the public, and we've got to synthesize using the ZoneCo report to kind of determine that, in addition to the cleaning up process of the organizational.
Right. I think even to be more specific, if you decide to go any of these routes, and it doesn't really matter which route you go, there is a procedural step with the council to say, okay, this is the option you chose. Here's the contract. Here's the process layout. So you can kind of forecast, well, these are the check-ins. This is how many public meetings. This is what's happening. So that's all laid out for you in a contract. And then you would approve a contract and a process at the same time if you choose one of these options. So if you don't choose any of these, you decide to, and that is an option, of course, you can do as is and not spend any money and not update your code and try to make minor changes that we can do in-house. But I'll tell you what, we're a little backed up on ordinance writing. So I think, hiring somebody to do it is the best way to handle whatever you want to do. So.
Other questions, council? Kimberly?
So to sort of follow up on Rebecca's question and make sure I understand. So if we pick one of these options, when we sign the contract with ZoneCo, I'm wondering, when is it where council will be able to give input about like the specific recommendations that ZoneCo made and things that maybe we would like to see that they didn't include, or vice versa?
Right. Yeah, so what you would do is, if you, let's just say you picked option 2, you would specifically say the sections you wanted to rewrite when you do the contract, and that's where you would say that. Now in option 1, a little bit looser, maybe you talk to the public first, you kind of see what people are feeling like, and then the council weighs in. Just depends on how you want to go about that, but I would propose something to you, a process to follow, and then you can react to that and see if that's enough, or if you want to be more specific about what you want done. So it just depends on how you want to handle that, but normally it would come through in a contract and would lay out the whole process and how this would work, when you would say what needs to change when. So.
Got it.
Other questions?
I want to just add to that,
Yep.
and I'm not trying to sound repetitive, but I think to what Julie's mentioning, even more specific, is with that contract that would come forward, we would, as staff, we would ask them to prepare that contract, the scope of services. So like with any contract, they're going to lay out exactly what their scope will be, and then the process by which they're going to implement that. And so you'll see that, and we as staff.
Time frame.
What's that?
And time
And
frame.
time frame, correct. And time frame. And so you as a council will see that when that contract comes forward. We'll lay that out for you. We'll work with ZoneCo on preparing a contract, but we follow a pretty typical process that we use for public engagement. You'll see that, and then if there are tweaks that you want to see in that process, that you want to have more council input at different touch points throughout the process, maybe council's at the end or in the middle, beginning, end, middle, I think that all can be part of the scope of services that would be outlined in the contract, and you have that control.
Paula, did you have?
Yeah, I was hoping you could help me understand some of the timing in this, and I'm sure there's a good reason, but I'm just, as a new member, hoping to understand. We have a comp plan rewrite that's coming in a few years. And so can you explain or help me understand the logic of having the zoning before that versus after that or concurrently?
Sure. Right, wouldn't you write your comp plan first and then do your zoning code, right?
I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2050 plan of the Met Council is actually not even out for digestion yet. So the population projections just came out, employment projections just came out, and until that gets adopted and solidified by the Met Council, cities don't write their comp plan because we don't know what we're abiding by. There's no regional guidance at this point for the next evolution of plans. That will come, and by 2027 we'll have that. I think though what's happening is there's a pressure to update your zoning codes to kind of prepare for some of those changes that might be inevitable. Maybe it's the lot size issue, it's density, it's whatever issue you're kind of hearing about. So I think I would say, yeah, it would make more sense to do the comp plan first and then do a zoning ordinance later, but
pressures are such that we need to move forward sooner if we're going to.
And there's no way to write a comp plan right now without the region being in full adoption of the regional plan.
Okay.
So it's kind of.
Thanks for helping me.
Yeah,
I wasn't
timing's
sure.
a little off, I would say. I would agree with you.
And we could revisit the zoning after we redo the comp plan. We could make, not a full rewrite, I wouldn't, but like.
Actually, we do that anyway. And so we do that, like, for instance, that's how the R1A zoning district came into effect because of the discussions during the comp plan. The council talked about a different, smaller lot size. R1A came into fashion at that point. The update to the zoning code was done after the comp plan was adopted. So yeah, exactly. Now they just chose to write, they chose a third option after that because they didn't want to deal with the whole code at that time.
Right.
So.
Other questions or comments?
Well, if we're weighing in on a preference, I would go with option 1. Option 2 doesn't make any sense to me. If we're paying the same amount of money, let's do the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Before I venture an opinion, although I agree with what Kimberly said in terms of they're the same. So option 1 seems more attractive than option 2 for that reason. But I can't really answer the question in terms of option 3 because do we feel that there are parts of our zoning code that need particular attention? And are there parts of our zoning code that we think, well, we're in a pretty good spot? Because I don't really have a good sense for that. And I'm sure ZoneCo has some opinions, but then also, are there any gold standards out there in terms of zoning codes that we would aspire to as we consider the options before us?
So to answer your first question, are there areas of improvement that we're
right? I
seeing?
mean, we do a pretty good job of housekeeping and changing. Corinne stays pretty busy and her team.
She always sends me notes. This has to be updated.
on updating and doing. We frequently approve housekeeping changes because state law changes and we get updated.
Sign ordinance and the subdivision ordinance and so I would say we've done a pretty fantastic job on all things environmental. I mean, I don't know that a code like this has been updated as many times as we've done on all things environmental. So I don't think that needs a lot of work, although there's tension on the tree ordinance. I know that. I can feel that. I hear it.
Right.
But I think the things that aren't totally solidified are we have the Southwest Light Rail Overlay District. We also have the planned I-394 Overlay District. Those two districts could be elevated a little bit as light rail comes on board, and this would be perfect timing for that to happen. So I would say light rail needs to be in mixed use and the kind of standards around that. We have enough teeth in our ordinance right now to deal with that, but it could, I would love to see an update on that. 394 traffic numbers need to be updated, that sort of thing, and that's something that could come with a total rewrite too. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments and thoughts?
Second question though. Do we aspire?
Is there a gold standard? Is there some,
Really?
Is there?
In Minnetonka, really?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm not, I mean, it's certainly not in Minnesota, but there might be, you know, it's a big country out there.
It depends on what it is, you know.
Yeah.
I really do think that people look toward us for environmental regulation. There are some cities that have gone more form-based. As a planner and an implementer, I'm not such a fan of form-based. I think a lot of people think it works good, but I've seen it in action. It doesn't work as good as people want it to. So,
And no offense was intended with my question.
no, but I mean, the Denver area, you know, we tend to look at ordinances in that area because of light rail. Also the West Coast, we often look at things in Washington, just to, because they tend to lead with a lot of edgier ordinances, that sort of thing. So we look toward especially the transit stuff. So.
Okay, thank you. So council, any more comments that you'd like to make or talking about these options? What are you thinking? Rebecca?
Can I-
Oops, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Patsy, I'm sorry.
I just want to go back to the whole comp plan versus zoning, rewriting this. So if we do all these things for $200,000 over the next couple of years, and then they come out with the, you know, then we're going to start doing a comp plan, can we change the zoning then?
Absolutely. Yep.
So then that seems to me to be redundant. And that would go,
Understood.
that would mean we would do option one, and then after we, when we're doing the comp plan, we would go to option three, because then that would chop it up, right? Do you know what I mean?
Depends on your perspective. I think it depends on how quickly you want to change things. I think that's the question you have to ask yourself. Do I want to wait for the comp plan to be written to get a full rewrite, totally within the realm of possibilities, but that's going to elongate.
Right.
You can change specific sections, but does that section work with everything in your code? That it becomes a little choppier and, again, very doable, but just you have to think about what's more important to you. And I can't answer that for you.
Right.
I want to say
Kizzy?
if it's going to be, if you're saying it could be redundant, can we wait to do the, doing the full rewrite until after the comp plan is written? Because I mean,
Absolutely.
to me, it would seem like if it's going to be redundant, it's more work. So why wouldn't we just wait to get it right, as we say the first time?
Timing.
Or try to.
Pressure, yeah. That's
Rebecca?
the only thing that's causing this discussion.
Not to totally make everybody's eyes cross, but you know, having been a close part of the comp plan process, one, I trust that staff's got enough of a finger on the pulse to be able to do this in the opposite sequence. So I don't have a concern about that. However, it feels like it's something that could be done in conjunction, you know, as we address something. I mean, is there a efficiency that could be gained by doing some of the public engagement together? Because we do so much public engagement for the comp plan. Maybe this is just too much and maybe it's too confusing for residents, but it seems like maybe there would be some financial efficiency and efficiency from, because I have no doubt that there are folks, myself included, that would like to see some of at least option 3 happening right soon. If we wait, I mean, let's be clear, the comp plan process starts in 2017. We will not approve it until close to, 2027, close to 2030. We, whoever the we is that's here at that time. So then we're talking if we wait,
29,
yeah,
30.
right. So to me, that's not going to cut it. I don't think. So my inclination, one, is to go with option 1 because I think it's cleaner. I think there's. I think if you do option 3, what you're doing is creating a lot of tension repeatedly. You deal with one thing and you kind of address it, and then you move, and there's a lot of conversation and engagement, which is good, but can also be very stressful. then you move to your next thing and you repeat that again. And I think if we're talking about a full, we want to address the whole zoning code, let's address it. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off, then to drag this out and I think as great of a job as everybody here has done, the zoning code, and if we look at what zone code has said, is old and in some places kind of cobbled together. So this gives us an opportunity to, okay, let's start again. Yeah. So my only question, I guess, I'm leaning towards option 1, and I would feel okay about considering wrapping it in to the comp plan process, but that still feels like kicking the can down the road a little far to me.
Time
If I
Green.
could, I'll just
question.
add my perspective. If you need to have something different or enhanced for the Southwest Light Rail, remember that is supposed to start operating in 2027. So you don't want uses to start developing along the line, which they already are, and then be coming in after the fact, because then you're just dealing with lawful non-conforming uses. You want to get ahead of the game on the things that you
Yep.
know need to be addressed. So that would at least suggest option 3 if there are specific things. But the other advantage of having the entire plan rewritten, or the code rewritten, even though it's coming before the comp plan, is because these codes develop over time. If you go through that code, you will be able to, I mean, if you had the history that some of the staff do, they would say, this was this development that caused us to rewrite this little part.
True.
This was this development that caused us to do this. And that's why it ends up being cobbled together. And you also lose some of the staff knowledge by the fact that it has been cobbled together over so many years. If you go through this process now and you have it completely rewritten, when you come to your comprehensive plan, everybody that's on staff is going to be very familiar with everything in the code, and they bring that into the comprehensive plan process. So then if you need to do, after your comp plan is done, you need to come back and clean up things, they already have that knowledge of everything that's in the code. It's going to feel less cobbled because they have that knowledge. But that's just my perspective.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments anyone would like to make? Deb?
Yeah, so actually, Corinne just kind of articulated a lot of kind of what I was thinking. And I, there's always the cart before the horse or the egg and chicken conundrum, but I do feel like redoing our zoning, it sort of provides definitions for things that I think, if there's clarity in our code, that's applied to the comp plan, not necessarily the other way around. And so I think there can be a lot of clarity provided that will help guide the comp plan. And we've always been able to change zoning we can always change zoning no matter when we do our comp plan. We do it not frequently, but it's not an unheard of occurrence. So I'm sort of, I don't appreciate the bill, but I feel like in for a penny, in for a pound, we might as well, I really feel like we need to do it right. And I think that by doing a full rewrite, that we sort of press a reset button where everything is refreshed. There's a holistic approach, I think organized in a way that makes more sense. You start peeling away, to Corinne's point, those little historical tweaks that we're, you know, sort of site-specific and we want to get more into a holistic approach towards our zoning, understanding some of that historical context. So while I don't really relish the bill, I think it's all in all a better approach. And I agree with Rebecca that I feel like it'd be kicking the can down the road, sort of to the detriment of the comp plan and to Corinne's point of some of the bigger considerations like Southwest Light Rail coming online and all of the development around there if we don't start addressing some of this stuff. So that's my general drift, I guess, about option one.
So we've still got more housing stuff to consider. So I'm hearing that there's a general desire to go with option one. Does anyone want to differ with that? Or if that's indeed the case, we'll move on to the next item. But I want to I don't want to cut anybody off, but I do want to be mindful of time. So anyone concerned about option one, a full rewrite? And I think Kimberly said it well. Well, if option one and option two cost the same and take the same amount of time, aren't we better off with the full rewrite? And I'm kind of a bargain shopper, so that's not the sole reason, but I think it makes good sense. Any other comments?
Okay, so the next steps on the zoning will come up to your budget meeting. So it'll
Yes.
be added to the budget.
Right.
And then the next step after that is to get the contract ready for the council to consider with all of the kind of layout of the process and public process. Okay?
If we were to pick option three and it was unknown, then we wouldn't have to talk about it at the budget meeting,
Good
right?
point. Good point. I would think of another process, though, to
Okay,
follow.
all right, very good.
All right.
So everyone good with that? I'll turn it back to Julie. Keep moving.
Yep. So the next thing is the homelessness encampment policy. We're not exactly following the order of the report, but if you have questions about other things in the report, just let us know after we get through
Yeah.
some of the highlights, because I know we need to get through these three things, and then we can talk about other stuff. So go for it.
Sure. All right, I will be respectful of your time. Thank you for having me tonight. I wanted to give an update on the homelessness encampment policy. As you know, kind of since COVID, staff became more aware of homelessness as a general issue in suburban areas. We didn't feel that some of the services that were provided at a county level were really serving Minnetonka residents and families in the way that we would like to see them served. So we spent a lot of time trying to understand homelessness in the suburbs, and we've had come to the council to ask for some assistance to assist with homelessness. So we have this partnership with His House Foundation that really helps kind of as a first point of contact intervention for homelessness in our community. In addition to that, so that was kind of like step one, we spent a lot of time working with our internal processes, so getting together with PD, social services, our school districts, various other agencies to figure out how to best serve this population. And we've had a lot of success in developing processes for how to kind of intake homeless folks and then get them the resources they need in a timely manner. I will say that this is a new approach for a suburban community to be kind of venturing into this realm. It's generally held by the county, and we're leading these efforts in terms of suburban communities. So I think that's something to be proud of as a community. Out of the homeless work group, we've also had the opportunity to create a dashboard that allows us to quickly respond when there's a homelessness case reported. So if PD or one of our staff is out and they notice something, we can go on an app and report a case, and then we all get a message that says, okay, who's handling this? What do we need to do? What's the response? And we're able to deal with quickly with these cases within like a matter of hours. So it's been a great tool that we have, like I said, as a resource internally to work to solve these homelessness issues. So going through all the different kind of spectrums of homelessness, the final piece is really looking at, should we develop a homelessness encampment policy or ordinance to help us determine what the steps would be in the future if we run into times when we have encampments in the city. So that is what our main question is for you today. So we, as the report said, we haven't experienced larger encampments, but we're looking to proactively address if it should happen. There's a couple things that are kind of happening in the background. There's a U.S. Supreme Court case that was recently issued a decision, and that was in Grants Pass, Oregon. They have a large number of homeless population and encampments in that community, and they had created an ordinance that made sleeping in a public space a civilian citation, and that ordinance was challenged in a lawsuit, and the 9th District Court of Appeals held that the ordinance violated the 8th Amendment prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. So based on that argument, it's really unclear how other communities can address this issue moving forward. So we're kind of in this waiting period to see how various ordinances or policies can be implemented in local communities. Oops.
So essentially, just that Grants Pass issue was basically an anti-camping ordinance, correct?
Yep.
And that was used to.
Which we have too.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Yes, so there's other ways to address these types of concerns. We have our outreach that we do now, but there's other cities have adopted policies that go more in depth on how to handle these situations. So what
And we have an internal policy. The police department has an internal policy, but I think this is, the point of this policy would be to make it more holistic as a city. So.
Yes. So,
And SCOTUS actually did decide that case, did it not?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
The slide was outdated. I think it might have been
Okay.
based on something that was prepared a while ago. But in your report, I believe
Right.
the staff
Okay,
report
just
is
wanna make
current. It reflects what the
Okay.
court decision was.
Right.
Yeah.
And basically, yeah, the outcome was kind of criminalization
Right.
of
Okay,
these
just wanted to make
camping.
sure
The
that I
camping,
was
the
following
camping
along.
ordinance was supported by the Supreme Court.
Right, exactly.
Right. They said that the city had the authority to adopt an ordinance like that, and it did not violate the Eighth Amendment.
that's right.
Yeah.
So this is a
Right.
relevant.
So the question kind of before the council is just, you know, do we want to work further on this? Do we want to talk about an ordinance or a policy? Obviously, the policy doesn't have as much strength in terms of enforcement. An ordinance would take on a different kind of, you know, kind of control. But the idea is that get ahead of it before it actually happens. That's the goal of what we're talking about here. And again, it doesn't mean that we don't have procedures. We already have internally a procedure, but how to get everybody on the same page about how that's going to be handled.
So, Paula.
Actually, yeah, so if I'm I just want to make sure I'm clear on this. So by having an ordinance, that would allow us, instead of, you know, just immediate criminalization, it would allow us to, in ordinance, place outreach as a step-by-step process, rather than perhaps later in the
Immediate
future,
ticket.
an immediate citation or jail or fine.
Right.
And so by doing this, I just wanted to clarify that.
Right.
That's,
And you
we're
can do
looking
it-
to avoid criminalizing, or some future iteration of a council criminalizing homelessness or people experiencing homelessness
Right.
without having the outreach measures that we already put in place as policy. We want to put them formally into ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right, and I think
Okay.
the biggest example, and again, I just want to distinguish a policy versus ordinance. So, for instance, we have a policy about
Policy.
how to deal with nuisance ordinances, right? There's all these rules about, not rules, but guidance for city staff about how we approach nuisances. The nuisance is an ordinance, right? The violation of the ordinance, that's
Yep.
defined. But the policy helps direct how you get there. So either way, we're just asking for some guidance if you want to pursue this.
Okay. Kimberly?
So, first I want to commend staff for having developed these internal policies that they're working with. I would say it makes sense to have written policy. I don't know if it necessarily needs to be an ordinance, but I mean, I could be convinced. Just even, if you get a call from a resident and they want to know, hey, what's the procedure, then if we have something written, we can say, well, first we do this. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to have a written, at least a policy, potentially an ordinance. Full disclosure, I signed on to an amicus brief in the Grants Pass case, supporting the plaintiffs. So not thrilled with the Supreme Court decision. And because, I mean, I understand the reason that the Supreme Court gave, but this is criminalization of homelessness. They didn't pass this ordinance because residents were camping in the parks. It was passed specifically to not have homelessness in their city, and rather than addressing the root causes of homelessness, it's just, we don't want to see it, we don't want to deal with it, go somewhere else. I cannot get on board with that. So I would not support any sort of policy where that's what we do.
Got it. Thank you.
Other comments? Kizzy?
For me, I would support a policy but not an ordinance. Far as the criminalization of being homeless, I think that's barking up the wrong tree for me. If you get a call that someone's homeless, whether it's ordinance in place or a policy in place, wouldn't we do the same steps, or we wouldn't? I mean, we have the program with his house, so in my mind, this should be already happening. So why do we need to put an ordinance in place if we have this program in place already that's supposed to be supporting people if we're getting these type of calls?
Yeah.
Yes,
One,
Julie.
You only approved a pilot program with his house. It's not a permanent program, so
Okay.
that's one issue. We're going to ask you to extend their contract and continue to use the money you've set aside. So we're going to do that, I think, are we doing that at the
In a
next?
couple weeks.
In a couple weeks. So you'll have that before you. The second issue is that while we have internal ways of handling things, you haven't publicly kind of come out and said how you're, as a city, wanting to handle this. And so it's really kind of that public facing, this is the way we're going to handle this in the city, and everybody understands what the council wants, so that if and when this happens, that you all are on the same page as a city council, and you're not questioning how perhaps Mike, as city manager, is handling this internally from an operational perspective. So if you all are on the same page and you adopt a policy, that means that's how we're operating. And it just
think that's
clears
important.
clears the air for everybody to know how we're going to go about this.
And I do think what I heard as well is we do have a homelessness effort to help individuals, but this is more of when we have groups of people that are all in one
Together.
area.
Yeah.
Right.
So encampment is more than one, and it's how do we address when people have camped out and they don't want to leave, essentially.
Right. Or
Rebecca?
don't want assistance either. Yeah.
You know, this is a real dilemma, and those of you that haven't had it happen in your ward we don't have an encampment, but I've had some homeless issues, and it's really a dilemma, and the city works really hard to get services, and sometimes people, and this is not, an excuse, I mean, it's a real thing, the people decline the services, and you are left in a little bit of a conundrum, and, I will tell you that Burwell Park is this close, I think, to having this issue. It worries me a lot. And so I have some thoughts, and we're not talking about that. You know, I have very strong feelings against criminalization, but also think we do not want to be handling these as one-offs. We really want to have some consistency, because you don't look like more of a jerk without your act together by handling things one way over here and then another way over here, and it doesn't look like you're meeting out your consequences in a consistent way, and that's probably the biggest problem that we could have. So I don't have any ideas on how we do it, but I certainly think we need to do it.
You know, if I may, I agree. I think we all agree that we don't want to criminalize homelessness. Homelessness is a tragedy, and we want to work at solving homelessness, not criminalizing it. But at the same time, we need tools in the toolbox, because I mean maybe all of us have gotten calls, about people panhandling at street corners, and people don't like that in Minnetonka. And it's, as long as they're on public land, we have no right to interfere. And the public does not like to hear that. They think, well, we don't want that in our community, but people have the right to do that. And homelessness is a tragedy, and I think I'm very proud of the fact that we have a process, and we have a system, and we have a way of getting people help. But when I read the Strib about the challenges of encampments in the city of Minneapolis, and we hear about the social problems that exist in those encampments, people don't want to leave because they don't want to go to a shelter, they don't want help, they want to do what they want to do. There's fentanyl, there's guns, there have been murders, just enormous social problems. And without tools in the toolbox, where the first thing is to provide help, the first thing is to connect with the county. We have a process where we demonstrate as much compassion and care to help people as we can. But then we get to these people who have deeper problems, or say, I don't want help, and I have the right to be here, and I'm going to be here, and I'm going to shoot up, and by the way, I've got a gun to defend myself. I don't think we want that in Minnetonka either. And I think we have to have the nerve to have an ordinance that criminalizes these things after all else has failed. And so I don't want to criminalize homelessness, but I think that I want to be prepared so that if we do have an encampment at Burwell Park, if we do have an encampment at Lone Lake Park, or in any of our larger parks or small parks, we have to have the tools, and we have to demonstrate that we are going to deal with this issue with compassion and provide solutions. But when those solutions are refused, and there's a risk to the public and a risk to the people in that encampment, we need the ability to do something. That's my personal belief. It's not turn you into a criminal first. It's you are choosing to be criminalized because you've refused all other interventions. To me, that's a type of ordinance that I could support. So I'll throw that out. And any comments?
Well, I will just say that in the example you gave, that you listed criminal activity that had nothing to do with where the person was located.
Right.
Because if they're doing drugs, I'm assuming it's not, they don't have a prescription, probably
Right.
don't have a permit for that gun. So those are those are things that could be dealt with
Good point.
By the police.
by the police.
Yeah.
So just to, I'm sorry.
Yep, Deb.
Excuse me. Sorry.
It's okay, pardon me. We get all wrapped up here and forget to look at you on the screen.
I just wanted to mention that I agree with all the comments about not criminalizing, and I'm somewhat in line with some of the comments that the mayor just made. And I will say that I work in downtown St. Paul, in City Hall, in the belly of the beast, in the middle of our capital city. And homelessness has so many, just brings so many challenges, the challenges that the mayor talked about, and also real challenges about keeping a city vital and trying to attract people to engage in commerce and daily business and the things that they need to do. Because when I walk to my office from my car, or as I drive, to where I park my car, there really are encampments. There are a lot of tents along the sidewalk, and it right by Excel Center. And I understand why the people are there, but to the mayor's point, you can't run a city with homeless people in tents on your sidewalks, and if they refuse help, we need those tools in the toolbox, and I think that we need at least a written policy to Rebecca's point about just being consistent and compassionate and solutions-based, and I think the consistency in having a plan and not dealing with one-offs, so that it's understood where the city stands on certain things, and also something that we can all get behind and keep our city vital while providing those vital resources that people that are really living on the edge need to make it. So I just wanted to say I'm definitely in favor of at least a written policy.
Other comments and staff? I don't know if you have enough direction.
So the goal tonight is just to
Do you
say
want to
yes,
continue the conversation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
And I hear yes.
I'm hearing yes.
I hear a little bit more on policy side, so we'll start there. And if you feel like you have an ordinance that needs to be adopted, we'll talk about that when we do the policy. So we'll start a policy and then we'll
Yeah, and I was just going to ask that question, if I may. I mean, if we could do it a bit iteratively, so we've got our ducks in a row, start with a policy. If we need more than a policy, then we have the ability to enact that. But, I think we all agree, I don't want to put words in people's mouth, but homelessness is a problem that we want to help solve, and we want to get people the help that they need, because we care about people in our community, and it's not just people who live in nice houses. We care about everyone, and our goal with every homeless person in Minnetonka is to get them housed, because so many problems go away if people have housing. So,
All right.
does that give you the direction you need?
Yes. Excellent. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you.
I know
Mike?
those are really two hard things to talk about.
They are hard.
Just thinking, Julie, could we just talk, clarity on timing? Just with, again, we've got a big workload, and so, again, we're just
I don't
clarifying.
have a deadline in my head, but do you have a deadline?
I don't have a deadline. I would just reiterate, what's been developed so far. I think appreciate your recognition of the work that staff has done with our current situation. They have been what I would call one-offs, in the sense it's when we get calls, it's been for an individual or an individual family, where we haven't had it's been 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 individuals in one location. But in taking those phone, and so we've been effectively dealing with those. I've had phone calls where people have reported that and then do follow up with a question, well, what if this turns into something bigger? And so that's what we're looking to address here, is being more forward thinking in terms of, as noted by staff, looking to the future of what if that were to happen, and what would we do when that would happen, or if it would happen. And so from a timing perspective,
I would say end of year is a good goal for us. Obviously the sooner the better, but
You're not suffering for lack of things to do right now.
Lack of things to do, no. So I'll just say by the end of the year, we'll probably have something done.
And I think, just to add one little comment to this too, is that I think a policy, a citywide consistent policy, is important, because I would not want to start having problems and having them be handled, quickly in one ward and not in another, or another part of the city. Oh, it was right by Ridgedale, so boy, did they jump on it. But when it was elsewhere, boy, nothing happened. I mean, I think we need consistency because this is an important issue, and I think that's what you're talking about. But I think there's a lot of unintended consequences with one-offs. I think we really have to develop some consistency. All right.
Awesome. We'll go into the dashboard now. And so this is kind of a free-flowing part of the meeting. This dashboard was created, I have to give a lot of credit to Kendall and Alicia for organizing this. When you have crazy ideas and then somebody actually executes what your crazy idea is, that's what happened here. So we're excited to see this. And really the intention of the dashboard is it wasn't really made to be like public on the website or whatever. It's really for you all to understand all of the work that's going on in housing in one place. And I'll tell you, keep this link handy. We'll keep updating it. We'll keep improving it. We'll add different tabs, that sort of thing, so you can always have access to this. I know you're asked housing questions constantly. I know that. You're asked about numbers. You're asked about policies. You're asked about what we're doing about this issue or that issue. Just keep going here because you'll find any question you have about housing here. So if you can go to the tabs, all right, and the only thing we give you community demographics, hopefully that's helpful. We try to source all the data that we provide you here, so anytime it's updated too, we'll go ahead and update the charts. Let's go into housing. There's racial demographics. Housing demographics is the next tab. This was something that Alicia and I had created some time ago to help explain the type of housing and then all the different programming that you have to address the type. So just to help you with this graphic, the bottom half is ownership and the top half is the rental market. And we're trying to make some spatial relationships too. How much of your ownership is actually affordable and how much of your rental is affordable? Where are your housing policies effective? More on the rental side than on the ownership side. What's effective on the ownership side? Well, you have your HRA loan programs, you have your CBG loans, you have your homes within reach, your indexing, your NOAA properties, city-owned property work that you're doing. So all those programs address ownership housing, as opposed to the left side of the screen in the orange and yellow area where you're talking about tax increment and you're using, maybe tax credits on a project. That tends to be in your rental categories, not in your ownership categories. And if you see different numbers here, the latest number is 27,900 housing units in Minnetonka. And again, you'll look at other data sources, it might not be that high because it's a couple of years old. All that new construction has just come online. So if you see some differences in numbers, it's just a timing issue. It's a date issue. Let's go into, if you want to look at specific numbers of affordability and the types of ownership products, you can see that here. If you're looking specifically, just a quick chart instead of looking at the dashboard, this helps you figure that out. If you're looking for housing cost burden, that chart is in here. And then again, you can see that tabs moving at the top. You see that? And so every housing policy that we have, plus more, if you hit the button below, you'll get that. Then the housing goals section. This is about the Livable Communities Act, the goals that the city has set for itself, what our production has been so far, what your last general goals have been, how we did there. What else do we want to show them? Rental production.
Information, the chart with the affordability.
You guys always ask for this chart, so we just put it up here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This chart shows you just kind of per unit, per year, how much assistance is being provided per project. So every time a project's added, we update this chart. It shows you what type of assistance it was, doesn't it? Did we take that out? We should have showed,
That's in the dashboard, though.
that's in the
Yeah,
dashboard.
Most of
It's
them
a-
are tax increment. the
Most
newer
are TIF,
ones.
right.
Mhm.
Good point. So if you want more information, you have to go to the dashboard. And there's the dashboard. Quick, there's a link. Let's go into programs for a second.
Went too fast.
You
There we
wanted to
go.
talk about rental registry?
Yeah, so we started earlier this year tracking our rentals in the community, and we've had a lot of success. So we have about 266 registered, and we've been sending out various communications to our landlords, and also just recently started a newsletter that goes out to all multifamily buildings for their tenants. So it's kind of like informing the landlords of things that we're offering in the community. So that's been great.
We had a great open rate,
connection. Mm-hmm.
right? Did you see that?
Yes,
Yeah.
incredible.
Isn't that crazy?
Mhm.
65%, I think it was.
And then click-throughs.
They actually read it or looked at it. Yeah, that was pretty incredible. So
Yes.
we're excited about
We're
that.
still getting quite a few applications coming in every week, and Kendall's the back end of those applications, getting them all processed and into our system. It's been useful for our public health folks in contacting various managers and folks that may have a question or need something from the
Or
city.
nuisance calls.
Yeah, or nuisance calls.
Yeah.
Somebody didn't cut their grass today.
Yes. So then we know exactly
Who to call.
Yep.
Mhm. On the landlord side, there's a lot of other information out there on our website that's tied into our rental license or rental registry program. So that all of that information is out there. And then as well on our website, our tenant resources. So we get a lot of questions from tenants. It ranges from everything.
Mhm.
So if we can't handle it, we know somebody who can. So that's kind of how we handle those. And then we have some updates in here on rental assistance that's been provided.
I want to talk about the next section, which is I think, Kimberly, you had asked about the investor-owned kind of stats and that sort of thing. So we linked the study that was done by the Federal Reserve, and that's actually it's a live map, and you can see different, and these are census tracts. So if you point to a census tract on this link, it'll tell you in that census tract how many investor-owned properties there are. Minnetonka actually isn't a prime candidate because of our housing costs are a little bit higher than other areas of the Twin Cities, and so we don't have as high a percentage of investor-owned properties, and actually that hasn't changed much over the last couple of years. It's something we watch, but it's not like the number one issue that we're faced with. Probably naturally occurring housing turning over to not naturally occurring is a bigger issue than this. But it's something that you have to pay attention to. So
And you can click on this and go into the actual dashboard
Yep.
to get real-time.
real-time data
info.
that the Federal Reserve provides. Did you have any questions about that?
Not on the investor-owned, so, well, maybe not on the investor-owned. So I'm wondering, so with the rental registry, are you getting a lot of, like Airbnb and Vrbo type registrations? And is there a way to tell if it's like owner occupied, or if someone is like, has bought a building and is just doing Airbnb year-round?
Yeah, we can kind of tell by just
Who
the
it is,
name
yeah.
and if we see multiple names showing up, or if it's like an LLC, that might be an indication that it's a group that's going out and buying properties, and we're not seeing that at all, really.
No.
Not much of it.
But I think when we come back to, I think this is, Mike, is this scheduled for November?
November.
Rental registry back in November.
Yep.
So we'll do some more analytics for you on the registry. Hopefully by then we'll get even more. If you remember, we couldn't quite guess how many single-family rentals we had. We weren't totally clear on that. We know we have 56 buildings in the city, so we know that number, but multifamily buildings. So it wasn't picking up our townhomes or our condos and different single-family that were for rent. So we're picking up a lot of those. You can see from the map that it's all
Yeah.
over. It's in every neighborhood. It's not just pinpointed to large multifamily, so.
It is interesting, we have had neighbors call and ask if a neighbor's property is on the list, so
Right.
there's ways that we're getting information about specific properties that
Yeah.
may be a rental, we don't know.
Yeah, we won't give out this list, we won't give it to anybody other than for city business, so, and the reason for that is because that's how we are collecting it, so we promise them that it's only for city business or city contacts. Otherwise, you might get marketing people that want the data, and that's not what this is for. So we promise homeowners and renter, landlords that we won't sell the data or give it
Yes.
to anybody.
And this is an internal
Map.
and
Yeah.
only a few of us have the access to it.
Right. Yeah, actually, it's protected. Not everybody has access to this. It's the people who need it for their jobs. Keep going. Let's see, going to home ownership, here we go. So we're tracking the median value. We're talking about, in this one, how many affordable housing ownership production. So we're tracking that. You can kind of see some of the work there. Obviously, this year we'll add the city-owned Roland. If you sign off on that project, we'll go ahead and do that. Homes within reach, indexing units, the number of units that are indexed every year, down payment assistance programs, home rehab. Let's see.
We have a townhome and condo dashboard as well, so this shows where all the different developments are. This is embedded into the other housing dashboard, but we separated it out for this.
Yeah, if you don't go on the dashboard and click through, it says
The
rent,
tabs.
and then it says townhomes and condos. That's the next tab over. Okay.
Just noting that we do have some city-owned properties.
This is kind of the history of the Roland Road property, kind of the video or partnership with Future, Better Futures, and trying to get the demo done and kind of how that's been working, and then what's next, which is the twin home development. We just saw some drawings today on the plans, and so hopefully we'll be back in front of you with a contract to sign. Oh, this is cool. Why
Yeah.
don't you show this?
Yeah, this is, Martha now has a mobile van that she uses to distribute various items to homeless folks, and she sent us a picture of her van. I thought it was cute that she put lights up in there. Feels like a boutique.
Yes, all these things are donated. In
Yep.
fact, at City Hall, we have a donation request
We
every
do it.
year for employees to bring in things. If it's coats, or she just tells us what she needs, and we put the list down. A lot of people donate to her van here.
Kendall and I
Yep.
load up the stuff and bring it
Yep,
over there.
you guys drag it to her, and then now it's much easier now that she has a van. But if you show the vans below, those
Yeah.
are the outreach vans. So they don't have an office anymore. Just if
Wow.
you didn't know that, they don't have an office. They operate on the road full time. So if they have outreach to do, they're showing up in their van and they're just getting people right in and trying to get
That's
help.
great.
Yeah.
And
Isn't that
Martha-
amazing? I know.
She
That's
also has
awesome.
a refrigerated van, and she does a lot of food delivery as well. If she knows someone is hanging in a specific spot, she will help with food.
Yeah, so she can deal with that part of it as well. We blurred this out because, again, this is private, but we just wanted to give you an idea of what that looks like. The red means they need help right away. Yellow means they're being dealt with and given resources. The green is it's been resolved. Somebody's gotten help, they've moved on, something has happened, but
Wow.
yeah.
They've made really efficient use of the money, it seems like. I mean, that was the one comment that I had in the packet.
I was
Yeah.
pretty impressed.
Wow, yeah.
They made it go a long way.
Yeah.
And they've
That's
helped
great.
59 individuals. Yeah, so pretty incredible.
Awesome.
But let's not forget about senior housing. We've got that whole thing going on. You know, we have about 2,200 units. We still hear about long waiting lists for specialized care like assisted living, that sort of thing. Definitely an issue, but we have some new senior coming online, so that's helpful with the new Greco project up on the north side of the city. And then,
Our big list of
how many other
regional.
meetings do we go to? Alicia, you can describe this
These
area?
are all of the all of the different partnerships and groups that we're involved in that talk about affordable housing. We're always there participating, but
Yeah.
there's
Oh.
quite a few.
One thing I wanted to point out, there is a new report on the state of the state's housing. I don't know if you guys saw this. It was the latest MHP, Minnesota Housing Partnerships report on housing in the entire state. The link there shows you that report. It's quite a good read. I just scanned it the other day, and it kind of gets you out of this kind of metro focused idea that we have all these issues. I mean, it kind of
It's all
broadens your
over.
perspective a little bit about what's going on in the greater Minnesota area. So just take a look at that. That's kind of an interesting thing. Oh, and then next week, I'm the chair of the League of Minnesota Cities Housing Task Force, so I'll be holding a meeting with lots of folks about housing issues and the policies of the League of Minnesota Cities. So we'll do that next week, and then I'll report back kind of what's going on there. Did we miss anything?
It's a lot there.
What did we talk about? I don't know. What do you want to hear more about? Maybe that's, we got a
Or
few more minutes
any
here.
questions, Council?
I had a
Susie.
question on how many folks got permanent housing from his house. I know that, you served him, but how many folks actually went into permanent housing after, like, hotel stay?
Yes, I did look that number up. We have a spreadsheet where we're tracking all that information. So out of everyone that's received services, which I'm
I
just
have it
getting
right
back
here.
to my report here.
Or-
So they were 20, his house did 59 residents, because there's individuals versus households, and we're counting residents. There were 6 that are now in permanent housing, which means they've kind of addressed all of the various things that they were going through. There were, when I looked at the spreadsheet, there's a lot that maybe had been in a fight or some sort of disagreement with family members, and she was able to get them the resources so that they could go back and live with their family members. There was quite a few, and I'm thinking those were the minors. I didn't spend that much time.
Teenagers,
Yeah,
sure.
that maybe ran away and then they were able to resolve and go back home. There were a lot that went into transitional housing, so maybe back through the county's coordinated program into a different type of transitional housing, or a center for domestic abuse, which we wouldn't consider that a permanent solution, but it's getting them in the right path. There were some that refused additional service, and trying to think if there were any other situations. I think that was kind of the majority. But the goal is to get people into permanent housing. Whether or not they choose to use the services you provide is, up for debate on some of them. So.
So do you have a number for permanent housing? Is it like
6.
six?
Six.
Six, so is it 6
Yep, that we've
individuals
been
in
able
the
to-
family, or is it 6 households?
I think that was individuals, right?
We are counting individuals now because we've had so many youths. It's not always families, so sometimes there's notes that will indicate that it's a family, but they're counted as individuals.
Okay. So that could be like youth or adults?
Of the
So just
15, just to
Yep.
look at the report again, 59 residents, there were 34 minors in
So
there.
when you think about the ones that were assisted to move back home, 34 of the 59 were minors. So they were provided some counseling or assistance to mend the
Family
disagreement.
dynamic.
Yeah, whatever
Yeah.
was going on, and move back
Right.
to a family situation.
Okay. That's good. I'm
Yeah.
just curious because I know, like, with those programs, I worked at, as y'all know, Coordinate Access, and it's different. Like, youth is one thing, families is another thing. We know that youth come in and out of the households for whatever circumstances, and then they get reunited back with their family, which is always a plus.
Us,
We want the youth to go
Right.
back home, so that gets them back stable in their homes. But when I think about, I'm more thinking about, like, that's good. I'm not saying it's not, and I appreciate that, but I'm thinking more about families who are like homeless who going to stay in a hotel, extended stay that we had in the document. When those folks leave from the extended stay, how many of those families got permanent home from the extended stay? Because I saw the number was focused, well, it was more of the money was used, funding was used in the extended stay. So in my mind, how do they go from extended stay to permanent housing? So
Sure.
that's what I'm focusing
And
on.
the hotel stays are more of a temporary solution to get into the coordinated entry program, and then through the coordinated entry to get into permanent housing. Sometimes people don't stay in that path. It's really hard to determine if somebody's going to stay the length or if something has changed. But that is really the turning point of the hotel stay, is getting them into that system to get them into the permanent housing.
And I wouldn't say it's easy to track everything either. I mean, I think that they do their best to report to us exactly how many cases they had, how many people they touched, but where these people end up, sometimes a little bit fuzzy if they haven't stayed in what I would call the path that they're trying to get to permanent housing. So there are some people that just, are gone for some reason. And so they could have moved out of state, they could have just moved to a different city. There's lots of reasons somebody might not stay with his house and their programming. But
And they aren't required to report back.
Absolutely not.
If we assist someone, they can take the resource and go on the path of getting into housing, but they're not required to report
Check back in.
'cause They're dealing with other things.
right.
in their
So
life.
I wouldn't say take the data and we give it to you as much as we can, but I wouldn't say that it's absolutely accurate.
Okay,
because-
no, that's fine. I was just curious about, are they actually getting places to live? So, thank
Some
you.
are, some aren't. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, are there other questions on this topic?
Any
All
other
right.
programs that you want to talk about? Anything else that we should be keeping on our radar? Don't tell me a month from now.
Oh,
Seems like you have a lot going on right now.
We'll tell more, have more for you in a month.
No promises. We're gonna
No
tell
promises?
You. We're
Okay.
gonna tell you.
I know
right.
you're trying to stick
Well,
to
how
the
about for
times.
now,
Like, I
maybe?
have a question,
That's
one
the
more
For
question.
now, yeah, right. Yeah.
For now, yes.
I just had
Kizzy,
one
I
more.
have one more quick
Yeah, I
question.
had one more question. I don't know if this under the pathway program too, it falls in this too. Okay, so I had a question too. I talked to Mike about we got 9 folks who purchased homes with the pathway program. 7 was white folks. 1 was an Asian. 1 was a black. I
Right.
wanted to know, did you have a demographic, male or female or transgender or whatever? How did they identify themselves, or did you know that?
Yep.
I think male, female was it?
3 men and 6 female.
Okay, and then I just wanted to know, I had mentioned this to Mike too, about how do we increase the number of BIPOC folks getting into those homes, purchasing homes through the Pathway program, and then is there a way we could try to look at making sure that we do, making sure that people are aware maybe. And then I wanted to make one more statement, because when I talked about our program to some realtors, I had went to a meeting in Minneapolis, and there was a group of business folks there, different realtors, just from all different sectors. And one of the things that they pointed out to me quickly, this is like when we first got the program, they said, yeah, Kizzy, that sounds good, just thinking about $75,000 that you're giving to folks that meet the income requirement. But when you think about the cost of the homes in Minnetonka, it's really not enough money to help BIPOC folks that usually does not make that kind of money, or I'll just say coming in at a lower income. So when I thought about that, I started thinking, like, how do we get there? Is there, like, one of the things they mentioned to me, they said, Kizzy, $75,000 is not really enough. How about $100,000? And I'm just saying this is what a realtor processed this with me. So I'm just talking about it, but it was mentioned. And then I was thinking about, like, how do we make sure that we increased the number of, I guess, BIPOCs. I mean, I can't say it no other way.
Yeah, I understand. Well, obviously, you know this, as we've talked about it before. Fair housing, you can't, dictate a certain raise for the program. So we know that.
Yep.
However, we put it on, this is an interesting way that people find out about it. It's on every lender's, module, I guess.
Yeah.
When they look at programming for certain cities, it actually comes up on their module that they type into, first-time home buyer, what kind of programming.
What city?
What
income level? What's this? And it pops out what every city has. It falls into those parameters.
Wherever they're looking for a home. So that's automatic now. It wasn't before. I mean, we
No,
got this
this is
to work with this program. And actually, any of our programs now have this ability to go through a portal. That helps. Second thing that I think helps, although just making sure that anybody that you know or anybody that you're talking to has awareness of this program. Word of mouth is just as effective as marketing. But understanding that it actually is, put race aside for a second, it actually is working for the people who are using the program in terms of the price. So if you look at the dollar figure, the dollar figure is 29,000 average is what people are using in the program. The range is between 10 and 41,000. So I would agree with you, Kizzy. I thought the number would be a much higher request, like everybody would ask for 75 and we wouldn't be able to help that many people. That's what I thought was going to happen. This is not telling that story. However, one thing I want to look at too, the next time we talk to you about this, and maybe we can put it in the report. Oh, there it is. Max. No, this is the max property value is 465. Trying to find a house like that. And I would challenge everybody to think this is not necessarily a single family house, okay? This is townhome, condo, not necessarily a single family house in this price range. We can do any of those types of units. 465 for a Minnetonka house.
Doesn't happen.
I'm not seeing anything on MLS for that price range. So if it was, probably Homes Within Reach would buy it.
Maybe 5 years ago.
Maybe 5 years ago. So probably, and I can't remember, are these all single family that they bought?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Let's get back to you on that because I'm not sure all of those are single family homes. So, but the point is they're using about half of what we thought they'd be using in terms of the price.
Well, I think it's because it's white folks that's getting in the program. It's more white folks in the program, and white folks tend to have more higher income. So that's why I'm thinking that's why it's like that. I mean, when we talk about income, when you do a comparison, like there's been so many reports about it. That,
the gap in home ownership, for sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think
I'm gonna look back at the income though, based on race. Let's do that for you, so we can.
We
give you that
also
number.
have it's not on here, but we get to see how many people applied and either withdrew or denied, and that number is much larger than the ones that go through, and that may be for a number of factors. Their house fell through that they were trying to buy, or they chose a home in a different community. But there's actually a lot more people applying than are getting approved for various reasons, and their backgrounds are all different.
Yeah, so
We can
maybe
report out on that.
maybe we could report on actual applications too, so you can kind of see those numbers as well.
No, I'm really happy that the program is working. Don't get me wrong. I think everybody deserves a place. I don't care what color, race you are, especially young people who are first-time home buyers. I know it's like a lot of like our teachers, our firefighters. You know, we talk about that all the time, and I think it's really important that. So don't think that's not what I'm thinking about, but I'm also thinking about making sure that we keep working on making sure that we start closing some of those gaps that we have across our state. So I'm constantly thinking about that. So
awareness is a big deal, but there is this. I talked about this with Alicia today. If somebody's going to look for affordable housing or some kind of house that they can afford, right? Are they looking at Minnetonka first?
You know, and I thought about that too. They're probably not
It's
thinking.
a perception. It's a wall immediately,
I
right?
thought
Because
about
they
it.
feel like, oh, I can't get there. And we talked about this. The mayor and I, we did this housing perspective study. How long ago was that? I don't know.
Don't ask me.
12,
It's a long
12,
time.
13 years ago.
Yeah.
But we asked people outside of Minnetonka what they thought of Minnetonka. And there is this perception problem that we have. And to your point, that might have to do with the race issue. So are people of color looking for Minnetonka as one of their choices of places to live? Probably not, because they think it's unattainable.
Yep.
And so then they're not applying, they're not looking here, that sort of thing. So that's a kind of a problem I think we have just on a basic level.
There's just a perceptual challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, when people think of Minnetonka, they think of Lake Minnetonka. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't tell you, it's probably been 100 times. I've said, well, I'm from Minnetonka, Minnesota. They say, oh, do you live on the lake?
Yeah.
I know,
I mean, and we've all had that. Well, it's because Lake Minnetonka is well known. People have no idea, if you don't live here, that we have 3% of Lake Minnetonka lakeshore. They think Lake Minnetonka
everything's
is in
ostentatious.
Minnetonka and everybody lives on the lake, and that's perception. We know it's not the reality, but it's a perception.
But I think that is getting in the way a little bit, to your
Yeah.
point about that we haven't seen as much diversity as maybe we were expecting. So
Yeah.
I keep that in mind when you look at some of these numbers, because I do think people just don't shop here because they
Well,
think
and
it's unattainable.
I think we, so to Kizzy's point, I mean, intentionality, and okay, how can we overcome that? Because it is something that needs to be overcome, because
Right.
people don't act on reality, they act on perceptions.
Correct.
And if
That's
the
what-
perception is that, well, it's just a bunch of rich white folks there, well,
Right.
then chances are BIPOC people
They won't look.
are not going to be looking for affordable housing in Minnetonka. I mean, that's just reality. So what can we do to overcome that? That's a challenge for all of us.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
How can
Yeah.
we?
We'll think more about that, and we'll think
But
about.
the other interesting thing Julie pointed out to me today, like Kizzy had mentioned, like young folks looking to get first-time home buyers. Average age up there is 46. So these are first-time home buyers on the average. age
40.
of
I know. I thought
46.
about that too. Like,
Yeah.
wow, they older.
They haven't attained housing ownership at this point in their
Yeah.
life, when that's just kind of assumed for some of us.
All right, is there anything else? Because I'm starting to fail on my time.
Oh, I'm sorry. We went on a
We're gonna
bit.
leave.
Sorry.
That's right.
Sorry.
All right. Anything else on housing? Are we
Nope.
good?
The next time we'll come back to is in November. We're going to talk about rental registry. We'll give you some more analytics on that and get your feedback on it.
Deb, I don't want to ignore you. Any thoughts or comments? Okay. So I believe that takes us to our next agenda item, and that is conference briefing. And Mike has that.
All right, well, thank you, Mary. I think in all of our conversations today, I think we spoke to all of you about this on the agenda, and since it's 8:26, if your goal is to be done at 8:30, I'll be very brief.
Well, be reasonable though.
In chatting with all of you on the phone, I think really maybe the way to just kind of kick this conversation off is.
Mayor, excuse me, I
Yeah.
can't hear my.
Oh, you can't hear. He didn't turn it on again, but he pushed the button now. He's good.
Wrong.
Deb, if you weren't absent, I wouldn't have to worry about my button.
Tom Stockard wants to hear you.
All right, sorry about that. Thanks, Deb. Thanks for the reminder. To just kick off the conversation, really, I think my goal and staff's goal is always to be responsive to council. I think first and foremost, and you rewind the clock a few years ago, the makeup of, I think, the previous council is different than this council, and so we have more council engaged with attending conferences and more engaged with learning and being exposed to more of the experiences that we're learning from those conferences. And so the challenge that it poses a little bit for me and staff is when we go to those conferences and we get those ideas that are being generated, just when those come back, how do we process those? Because really, I think from a staff perspective, and I say staff more so myself, because I chat with you all about kind of post-conference debrief, and in you're sharing with me some of the things, the sessions you've attended, some of the things you've learned, some of the things that might benefit Minnetonka, and it starts to become kind of a bigger list of things that we could be doing and should be considering. And so in order to manage that, so we're meeting everyone's expectations, because the last thing I want to do or staff wants to do is say, nice idea, but we're not going to get to it. Or are you thinking that I shared that with staff and it didn't go anywhere? And so really just wanted to tease out with you tonight, just what does that look like? How do we make sure that your expectations are being met? Staff is hearing what some of the ideas you have, and then how do we again kind of take that from a conference and putting something into motion without, again, kind of upsetting kind of the priorities that we put in place with our strategic plan and the other items that we're trying to adjust throughout the year. So no problem to solve other than I think just really making sure we're all on the same page with expectations, how we kind of vet those out. And as you all know, we do have a process now where we do set up our study session work schedule, and that'll come up in December. So I do create a list. I create multiple lists. One of those is when you do share things with me, I do write those down. Some of those tend to be policies. Some of those might be executional. Some of those might be simple as like, hey, can we look at changing our website, as into then even bigger policy issues. And so how we synthesize those is important. Because you're the elected officials, we want to make sure as staff we're on a path that's meeting your expectations. And so with that current process, I've got that list. We'll plan to bring that list to you in December. And that really what that will do is, as you've done in previous years, prioritize those, and that'll create the roadmap for 2025. That being said, there's some of the things that come up that seem more pressing, that are just beyond just an ordinance or perhaps a policy matter, where it's more executional in nature. And so, again, I just want to tease out with you a process, some things that I've thought about since chatting with all of you and having conversations with you today and even some last week on perhaps even as a conference follow-up. I could send out a preemptive email just to start teasing out some of the things that you're learning and start synthesizing a list. That way we can be more methodical in what we're discussing and again, making sure those items that should rise to the top do rise to the top and not getting lost within just one-on-one conversation. So I'll stop there. I think all of you know what we're here tonight to discuss, and I'll turn it back over to Brad, or questions that you might have from me on how you want to tease this out a little bit. I wasn't expecting that we would have a list tonight or we'd start going through any lists tonight, but just more about process. What does this look like? How do we, again, set up success as, again, we kind of chug along throughout the year, because we've had a National League of Cities conference. Many of you have attended the League of Minnesota Cities conference. We have another National League of Cities conference coming up later this year. So with that.
Fair enough. Well, thanks, Mike. I don't know if anyone has any offhand comments they'd like to make on this topic. I mean, you know, Deb.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I mean, I think because I'm not privy to the way people are conveying the information that they get or the ideas that they're generating to you. I mean, I'm just wondering if there is, you know, because we all send you those things separately, is there a system or a process that you felt would be helpful for you or staff for us to share? Are there sort of recurring, you know, like, are there sort of recurring challenges to the way people are expressing it, or patterns, things that happen over and over that specifically you want us to try to problem solve a little bit tonight?
Mike, any thoughts? Or that's a loaded question.
Yes, it was loaded. I'm going to turn my mic off, Deb. No, very, very good question. Not specific. I mean, I think to be probably a little more direct, you know, if 5 council members go to a conference and I get 5 ideas, now I got 25 ideas that have now landed on my lap, and so I'm trying to figure out, all right, so some may are good ideas, some maybe not, and so again, all of a sudden I got 25 things, and I'm trying to then manage that in a way that's productive. And so that's really the heart of the issue, Deb, is because I want to meet your expectations. And so
Well, and I think
That's the
there's a
hard-
couple of issues that make it hard too. Is that, we could come back and boy, there's an idea that I'm really hot on, and I could go talk to a bunch of council members and say, yeah, talk to Mike about that, and we'll gang up on him, and then he'll have to do it. Well, that is not consistent with the open meeting law. I knew I could make Corinne unhappy if I teed it up a certain way. But I'm thinking about. I was with a mayor from an unnamed city, and at the National League of Cities, he said, yeah, I come to this meeting, and he said, I get 15 or 20 great ideas, and I drive staff insane when I get back. And I think that's a little bit about what we're talking about here, is we do get good ideas. And so how do we get them fairly communicated and vetted? And if we each came back with 10 ideas, and 5 of us went to the conference, that's 50 ideas. That's overwhelming and unfair for staff. But I'm wondering if maybe we could have a bit of a discipline and say, okay, I'm going to share things with staff that I think they should know about that I got at the conference. But I'm only going to, the most I will share is 3. I might have 10 good ideas. The most I'm going to share is 3. And then I think if Mike wanted to take that list, no more than 3 from each of us, and share it with us, because then it's public. Then we could say, okay, well, let's rate these, and maybe create fodder for we could either provide feedback to Mike via email, or we could, but not reply all. Or we could say, okay, now we've got some direction given to Mike from some of these good ideas, because there's not only presentations, but there's the trade show, and you've got people selling you, and sometimes they're selling you really cool stuff, and you think we ought to buy it. Now understand, with all of our ideas, we don't have any funding sources attached to them either. But I think, when I talk to Mike about this, my sense is he's trying to say, okay, how do I demonstrate that I'm interested and I care, but how do I vet all these ideas when I get, different ideas from all the different council members? And I think that's a fair question. So that's one idea, but any way we can help him sort through, keep us informed, and have an involvement. Rebecca.
I think your idea is great. I kind of shared the same idea with Mike today. I would be excited to hear, because we all go to different sessions and there is an opportunity to get some information. I would say kind of that information, get it to Mike. Mike can collate it, somebody can collate it. And if we have interest, so say there's a list of 10 ideas, we can vote
rating charters.
But let's show some restraint. Let's not pick our top 3. If we only like one, then let's only pick one and say, I would like to consider this. And that can go on our study session list, unless there's something Mike says, should we consider escalating this? But then it can go on our study session list, and in December or January, we can decide, is this still a good idea? Do we want to talk about it this year? So I think some being deliberate, I'd like to get the information. I love to hear ideas. And then seeing if there's a general consensus to want to hear more, or talk about it more, and then filtering it through the other things we've asked staff to address on an annual basis, I think helps us keep focused on not just like a whack-a-mole of ideas. That's my thought.
Any other thoughts from council members? Deb?
Yeah, I just think about some of the sessions that I went to at National League had to do with like resources. So I'm not necessarily asking us to take action on any one thing. And I don't always know what the city needs, like what different departments need, but I go to sessions where they give resources, and then I'm, tell Mike about it. We may not have the resources to even investigate the resources, or we might really need the resources that we're talking about. And you know, you might, I mean, we've all been to different conferences. Sometimes they're just chock full of great sessions, and sometimes a bunch of the sessions aren't what you expect.
Kind of does.
So, you know, I think, you know, if there's a really, really good year where we have a lot of sessions, just because I will just say to Mike, I will let you know if I really feel we need to take action on something, but a lot of the time if I'm sending you information, it's really informational, or I'm often asking you what you know, what if the city needs it, or if I, you know, need to take it somewhere. So that's part of it too, is I think just the inundation of information, because we do all go to different sessions, and so I try not to overload, but I don't know, I just feel like if it's good information, I don't always know, like if there's like public safety grants, I went to a great session on that, you know, but I went to a bunch of other good sessions, so what do I do with it, you know, do I show restraint and just hang on to it, or do I share it?
No, well, that's a good point. I think sharing, absolutely share. I think it's just more about how, I just want to make sure, again, I think the way I tried to tee it up is
Priority.
staff cares. Staff, we spend, taxpayers spend money for all of us to attend conferences, council and staff. And so when staff goes to conferences, we as staff too bring back ideas and put things into motion as well, things that you don't see. And it's oftentimes it has to do with if there's ideas that can streamline operations, if there's a way to be more efficient, if there's a new idea on how to do better public engagement, if there's an idea on, oh, we should move something on our website, or maybe we need to highlight something differently. Those are all, absolutely, we're doing those things. I think it's more sometimes the deeper policies or things that come up where it's like, where I know, and I'll do a better job of vetting those out with council when these come up, so I can try to categorize them into perhaps different, whether it's executional, whether it's more policy. And so I'll work with you on that as well, on how we, again, I think address these in terms of whether there's financing available, what resources are needed, because sometimes ideas are just more than, oh, let's just do this, because it involves people, it involves money, it involves time. And so some things can be more difficult to put into motion. And so I think that's really the pieces that I'm trying to hit on, is some of the more deeper ideas where it's not just straightforward. So the straightforward stuff, yes, we're taking care of and we're often doing, and I'll do a better job of communicating that to you on, like, all right, yes, here's that idea, and we can put that into motion, or perhaps it goes on the list to get further vetted out. Deb's correct. Deb and both, I think Kimberly and perhaps even others, but Kimberly and Deb come to mind in terms of very good about forwarding grant opportunities, because you have some exposure with some of the grant opportunities. We always hear there's lots of money out there, and so we're exploring those. Staff goes to those different conferences, and here, you know, we get some of that same information. But it is helpful to know what you're exposed to. That way, I do pass it on to staff members, and sometimes it's grants that don't work, and sometimes they are, and sometimes we're applying for them. So it's working really well. And again, there's no problem we're trying to solve here. I think, again, I just want to make sure we're on the same page with meeting expectations, because it's really my goal is I want to make sure we as staff are meeting your expectation when it comes to things we're all exposed to, because our goal at the end of the day is to really better our city and make sure we're in concert doing that.
Can I say something?
Yes, Kizzy.
I was just going to say, I think I like the idea that the mayor said, where we bring the information back and maybe give like 1 or 2 ideas or whatever, and we can kind of vote on it once you kind of tabulate everything, and to add it to a study session at some point. Because I think if we're going to continue to go to the conferences, I know since I've been on the council, I've been to a lot of conferences, and my phone is full of information. I don't always give it, you know, I don't always give the information over. I'm guilty of that, but I think if we're going to be, I start thinking about this, I'm like, we are really spending taxpayer money going to these conferences, and I don't hear us, I know I brought it up, I don't hear us talking about it enough. And if we're going to continue to do this, like, we probably should be putting it out there in public that we are discussing it, and we are trying to do some of the information that we're getting. So
Thank you, Kizzy. And I agree with that. I think that, you know, I don't think we cavalierly go to conferences, but it does cost money to go, travel and the cost of the conference. And so if we are very intentional about coming back with, you know, and also narrowing our list down, you know, we can have a list of 30 great ideas, but okay, what are the top 2 or 3 that could benefit Minnetonka? And just be disciplined about that. I think then we are offering our taxpayers a greater return on their investment for our investment. I think that's what we want to do. So, I don't know. Is
Yeah,
that
no, I think
helpful?
this
Is
is
that where
helpful.
you-
No, yeah, this is perfect. I think I got enough information. I appreciate the conversation quickly tonight, and we'll tease some of this out, and I'll send some email. I got some
Good.
information.
Yeah,
We'll-
okay,
I
and
got
then Paul- I
some
think Paula had a
processes in mind.
comment, too.
Yeah.
Just 2 comments. Thank you for this, and I like the idea of having a template. I think that we discussed that, something that goes out either in advance or right after conferences. So as- Sorry.
Your turn.
My turn. Long day. I like the idea of having the template or something that goes out either in advance, ideally even, or after conferences that we can fill out and, you know, have some of this information so we also can know, especially newer council members, what kind of information is helpful. The other thing I liked, I think I heard mention of, is that having, maybe not holding everything till the end of the year. Somehow having discussion, whether it's at study sessions, like these were things that rose, you know, that are being talked about, whether at conferences or just coming in from our residents that we're passing along. And then maybe some of us are having the same ideas that, you know, we can go, but it would be helpful for me, maybe as a newer member, also to understand, you know, that I'm not in isolation in some of my things that I'm thinking of, that other people are having these ideas or hearing these things from residents as well. And in a forum like this is maybe a 15, 20-minute discussion in our study sessions where some of that can rise to the top, so it's not like a hurry up at the end in December and try to, you know, put this all together. And then that also allows kind of some of those long-term conversations, but also some like action steps or executional issues that you were talking about that I think might be helpful to talk about in the course of the year, rather than saying to my resident, well, I can put this on a study session and we can maybe talk about it next year. So that's my 2 cents. I think it would be really helpful. So thank you for thinking of that, and, you know, kind of inviting council members in and trying to figure out a way to get our input in an organized fashion that works for everybody. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Anything else on this one?
The other thing that I'd say is that, you know, we send Mike, God knows, I mean, patience a joke, but, you know, I think we can send information to Mike in different ways. And if it's really just an FYI, I usually just say FYI. If it's something that I need action on, you know, we'll be talking about it. So I think there's that as well. And if it's really just a matter of an avalanche of FYIs, then I can be more judicious maybe. But,
This isn't confession, Deb.
You're not Catholic.
All right, pardon me for that. So let's see. I think we've covered this. Then August study session topics and date. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Let's see. So on just taking a look at the upcoming schedule. Oh yes, August. So looking at our study session work plan, we've got in August the 2025 general fund budget. So we'll have that conversation coming forward. That'll be really the bulk of the conversation. And then next month's strategic plan update. Again, today was Julie with Livable and Well-Planned Development. Next month is Safe and Healthy Community. So we'll hear from Chief Fox and Chief Moorboom on that one. And then I'd like to tease out with you 2025 meeting logistics. Because in October of every year is when we set the following year calendar. So in October, Becky Kuzman, our city clerk, works with our staff. We start pulling together the framework for all of our meetings for 2025, and we adopt that in October. But before we do that, I want to tease out 3 things with you. If I should, I'll just share with you quickly what those kind of 3 things are, so you can start thinking about it. 1, meeting start times. So whether, if we want to think about moving, instead of 6:30, moving back to 6 o'clock. So one conversation, because when we set the calendar, we'd want to know start times. So teasing out a start time change. Another consideration to talk to you about is moving our meeting nights to perhaps another night, maybe Tuesday nights. A lot of cities do meet on Tuesdays. Reason for that is I've heard from council members that will ask the question, can we get our packet sooner? The sooner part is harder from a staff perspective. We have so many moving parts to put the packet together. It's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all kind of a 3-day thing that happens to get a packet out on Thursday. So another solution, rather than getting the packet out a day sooner, is maybe moving the meeting day to Tuesday, if there's an appetite to move to a Tuesday night, which would give you another day to review the packet. Don't have to. I'm really indifferent on that, so we'll talk about whether council has an appetite for that. That does require moving some other meetings around. And then the third thing, what was the third thing? Remember, Miranda? Oh, the agenda. I've had a couple council members also talk about like business items, as we all know, is later in the agenda. And as we all know, we see a lot of folks that come in at 6 o'clock or 6:30 and wait till 9:30 before we get to business. And so the only way to change that would be to move perhaps business up in the order, but that would require council action through your rules of procedure. So it's a meeting logistics. I just want to quickly tease out with you next month. And
Is that rules of procedure, or does that require a charter change?
In your
rules of procedure.
Okay.
So we'll talk about the
All right.
lineup of the
Yep.
agenda items.
Okay. Any other comments? Or-
So that's what's for, I'm sorry, Brad, that's August, like I mentioned. September, strategic plan update on community inclusiveness. We'll have roles and responsibilities for volunteer community interest groups. I know that's been on your work plan. And then Ms. Diamond's going to talk about city manager review process, perhaps kind of changing that up for this year and some ideas around that. So that's September. October's identify policy matters for boards and commissions. So I know we talked about, is there some body of work here that you want to pass off to boards and commissions and what that might be, and then in strategic plan update as well that month. So that's the next couple of months. Again, the study sessions I always say are yours, and so if you want to move those around, add anything, now's the time to express
Right.
that.
Thanks, Mike. Any suggestions? Kimberly?
Yeah, so that too, but.
Oh yeah, October we've got
This is,
the C tool, right?
yeah, this is a new, I will be your problem child. So, around the tree ordinance tension, I had suggested a possible amendment to the tree ordinance back in February that, again, didn't get traction. And I know Councilmember Calvert mentioned that she had wanted to see some changes in the tree ordinance. So talk to Mike about that, if we can get the tree ordinance on the study session, or if we want to wait and look at it at the same time as we look at zoning. I'm not sure, but anyway, that's what I would like us to discuss the tree ordinance.
Very good. When would we fit that in? Mike, I don't know, do you have a suggestion, or Corrine, or Deb?
Yeah,
Any thoughts?
Thanks, Brett. I would maybe turn to Julie as well. In terms of timing, again, I think, as I mentioned to Kimberly when she asked me about it, which is correct, and that is, it's really up to you. It's when do you want to discuss it? If you want to kind of unpack some of that tree ordinance now, we would want that direction from you as council. And then if so, where do you want to put that in? And how deep do you want to go into the tree ordinance? I think the historian, Ms. Wishnack, would say the last time the tree ordinance was discussed, and some of you were on council when that happened, that was a 2-year process. or if it's just how big a scope, how narrow of a scope do you want to hone in on the tree ordinance, the public engagement process in that. So we could start that now, and then I would say if we're going to start that now, staff would want some direction on, again, as you've heard us say, we've got a lot in the hopper, and so where does that fit into the timing? And then, or the other option is, do you want to unpack that discussion during the zone co rewrite, the zoning rewrite, which will be 12 months to 18 months down the road.
And I'll throw out a
Do you have
thought.
anything
I
to add
mean,
I do have one thing to say. Before you go.
you know, I would say that I think before we decide that, let's understand what changes our different council members have regarding the tree ordinance, because it could just be a couple of things. I mean, we went through the thing recently about the acre lots, and you know, kind of some were lamenting the fact that that was part of our ordinance, and maybe it would have been nicer if it was an acre and a half or something like that. But if there's some specific thing, I mean, rewriting the tree ordinance is a big job. If there are tweaks to it on specific issues that people are concerned about, let's identify those before we decide how much time we're going to have to spend on it. Because if there's 2 or 3 things that people don't like about the tree ordinance, I mean, I've got a few ideas too, but I mean, that's a lot different than a total rewrite of the ordinance. And I'd rather be surgical and quick than turn it into a big deal when it's not, might not necessarily be a big deal.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, my personal thing is just a very specific.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure.
Yeah. Deb?
There are a couple of things. One is the issue that you brought up, Brad, and then the other issue is the woodland preservation ordinance, which, you know, has worked up until now, but this was a perfect case in point where this was exactly what I was afraid would happen, and it is happening. So woodland preservation and, you know, the issue that Kimberly's talking about, and that you're talking about, but also, I mean, ZoneCo had recommendations. So I think we want to get a little bit clear about sort of what our purpose, what we're hoping to get out of it. And I know that on October 14th, we have issues for boards and commissions to discuss, and maybe this is one of them with, you know, specific guidance about sort of what we're looking at, you know, out of that. So that might, the October 14th discussion might be a good place to just start vetting some of those issues with the tree ordinance. And I know ZoneCo has their own idea, because they're saying our tree ordinance is too strict and restrictive.
And then, Julie, did you have, or has that been identified? You had a comment.
Yeah, that kind of was, I think, concern was you change one part and then you go back and you do your zoning ordinance rewrite and then you're changing it again. I'm just thinking about
process,
consistency, predictability, that sort of thing for people who are in the ordinance every day, developers, builders, that sort of thing.
Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we, as a suggestion, I mean, I think we've teed it up now. Let's kind of dimensionalize it, and maybe we can talk about, okay, what do we want to focus on, and then decide when we should do it based on how broad that scope is. Does that make sense?
Maybe as follow-up, we're up against our 9 o'clock window here. What staff could do is perhaps just tease out an email with council on, if, to Kimberly's point, Kimberly would like to be very surgical, it sounds like, and maybe others want to address different parts of the ordinance. So maybe we should just understand from all of you, like, what is it about the tree ordinance you want to study? That'll give us a better sense of how much that will be, how much work would that be involved, and timing of that.
Yep.
Because we do have.
Then we can better lay it out.
What's that?
We could better lay it out.
Yeah, let's know what we're asking.
Okay.
I'll just say, it's very hard to address the tree ordinance in a vacuum, because it has major consequences to our other goals. And so I worry about, just like I don't like what happened either, but I also don't want to create other problems. So I think it's a big, I mean, I do think it's a bigger issue than we think it is.
I think that's fair. All right, well, let's noodle that and share ideas with staff, and they'll come back.
Yeah,
Does
I
that
think
work?
I'll still send out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a
your
good
point's
idea,
very
Mike.
valid, Rebecca, and I'll send out an email. Perhaps we'll kind of start identifying what parts of the code people have concerns with, and then we'll go from there.
All right, well, let's see, it's about almost 9 o'clock, and so we're gonna,
Paula,
Paul, did you have another, oh, sorry.
Is there something that could be teased out or
It's
Just-
secret.
When we were talking about maybe discussing some of these issues per things that are rising to
Yeah.
the top, conferences or whatever, but would this be something that we would discuss as an issues that we want to discuss? Again, if that's going to go on to our study session thing, talking for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes in a study session, this could maybe do that, or
I think what you're saying is,
maybe if you,
per the last agenda item,
Yeah.
does this fit into, even though
Thank
this wasn't
you.
a conference
yes.
agenda item, does this kind of fall in that same kind of conference type category where we vet this out with some of the other things?
Yes.
Fair enough.
Is that, I think, what
Yes.
you're saying? Okay.
All right,
I'll send an email out to tease some of that out.
okay, anything else? Otherwise, I'm gonna call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all for being here tonight.